The Black Friday BOGO sale is here at All Family Pharmacy, and let me tell you, this is the kind of deal that actually matters. From November 24th through December 2nd, when you buy one ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, or menbendazole, you get another one absolutely free. So at a time when Americans are tired of being lectured and restricted by bureaucrats, this is your chance to be prepared on your terms. No politics, no gatekeepers, just real options that put you in control. Here's how simple it is. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/stone. Place your order online and a licensed physician reviews it immediately. Once approved, your medication ships straight to your door, fast, private, and secure. This Black Friday event lasts only 1 week and supplies are limited. So when the inventory is gone, that's it. No extensions, no second chances. Just like every other real deal worth talking about seriously. If you want to stay ready, stay protected, and stay independent, go to allfamilypharmacy.com/stone before December 2nd and lock in your Black Friday BOGO deal. Take control of your health. Stay prepared and stay free.
Introducing Meta Ray-Ban Display, the world's most advanced AI glasses. With a full color display built into the lens of the glasses, it's there when you need it and gone when you don't. Send and receive messages, translate or caption live conversations, collaborate with Meta AI, and more. Be one of the first to try Meta Ray-Ban Display. Visit meta.com/Meta Ray-Ban Display to book a demo and find your pair.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome. I'm going to introduce a new segment here on the Roger Stone Show. It's called Things That Make You Go, So Senator Cory Booker has gotten married. He was married on November 24th. This means that Cory Booker, the senator from New Jersey, is running for president. And this is meant to dispel long-standing notice of his bachelorhood. I wrote a book on Cory Booker in 2020 called Spartacus, The Real Cory Booker Story, in which I outlined the fact that when he was the mayor of Newark, Cory Booker embezzled $200,000 from the Newark City Water Authority, called Watershed, basically laundering the money through his law firm. He claimed that he did not vote or approved this payment to his law firm, but pulling down the actual minutes from the Water Authority meeting, he was both present and he voted yes to pay his own law firm $200,000. The woman who approved the payment went to jail. Cory Booker went on to the U.S. Senate. When confronted about the $200,000, he had three different stories. First, he said it was a buyout from his legal partners. Then he said it was deferred compensation. And then lastly, he said it was for legal work actually done for the authority. What it was embezzlement. I'm going to republish my book, Spartacus, going to bring it back out with a new foreword, because in the end, it is Cory Booker's epic corruption as the mayor of Newark that will bring his candidacy down. Another thing that made me go home this week is a book by Dick Morris, the longtime political consultant. Dick Morris has written a book entitled The Real Charlie Kirk. The irony of this, of course, is that I knew Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was a very good friend of mine. Charlie Kirk didn't like Dick Morris and didn't have much of a regard for him. Dick Morris has written a long book about his involvement in the 2016 election of Donald Trump. You can find that book in the fiction sections of your bookstores because Dick Morris had nothing whatsoever to do with the election of Donald Trump in 2016. More recently, he has made comments that would indicate his heavy involvement in the 2024 election of Donald Trump, a historic return to the White House. Dick Morris had nothing whatsoever to do with that either. Dick Morris is, in all honesty, responsible for the election of Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, a man who, based on my book, The Clintons' War on Women, sexually assaulted or raped at least 38 women that I could identify. I've never been sued over that book. I stand by every word in it. Bill Clinton, as a sexual assaulter, had a very interesting technique. Juanita Broadwick, a good friend of mine, details this in her own book. Clinton would bite through the upper lip of his sexual assault victims, and then when they would take their hands to try to staunch the bleeding, he would rape them. Bill Clinton has tried to walk away from this, but there's a long history of sexual abuse there. In fact, Dick Morris, in his own book, details Bill Clinton's physical abuse of Hillary as well as his physical abuse of Dick himself. So this made me go, Another thing that makes me go, is the fact that Senator Slotkin and Congressman Goodlander are two of the 6 Democrats who last week made a video urging members of our military to disregard and disobey orders by the Commander-in-Chief, Donald Trump, if such orders were unconstitutional or illegal. Slotkin is a former CIA analyst who worked for John Brennan, the guy who orchestrated the Russian collusion hoax. Brennan, a communist by his own admission, a convert to radical Islam, a man who got caught spying on a U.S. Senate committee that was investigating his use of illegal torture as CIA director. Also the man who signed the visas for 4 of the 8 hijackers who were told attacked America on 9/11. So is Slotkin's involvement in the CIA coincidental? Add to this the fact that Congressman Goodlander from New Hampshire, another person in the seditious 6 video urging those in our armed services to ignore orders of the Commander-in-Chief, is the daughter of Jake the Fake Sullivan. Jake Sullivan is one of the orchestrators of the Russian collusion hoax. It was Jake Sullivan who put forward the entirely false narrative that the Trump organization had a computer terminal for a Russian bank, the Alpha Bank, inside their offices. This was yet another lie. So this is all beginning to smells to me like the preparations for what they call a color revolution. Later on in the program, former National Security Advisor General Michael Flynn joins us to explain to us exactly what is about to happen. It is not good, folks. But furthermore in this plot, and in the things that make me go department, are the questions surrounding the alleged shooter of the 2 National Guardsmen, one of whom, Specialist Sarah Beckstrom, has died. The other one, Staff Sergeant Andrew Wolf, remains in critical condition. That man, Ranmalnullah Lakanwal, worked for the CIA in Afghanistan. There's no question about that. That has been documented. But what is strange is the fact that he came to the United States in 2021. By law, he had 1 year to apply for asylum, but he didn't. He didn't apply and wasn't approved until 2024. How could that be? Why would they make an exception for him, other than the fact that he was working for the CIA? I see this as all part of the same seditious 6-color revolution that is headed our way. This has now gone beyond the point of conspiracy theory. It's not just Alex Jones talking about it, but Jesse Waters addressed it the other night on Fox. There are those in our government and outside it who cannot live with the results of the 2024 election. These are the same people who had no problem whatsoever with the fact that Barack Obama probably killed more people with drones than any president in American history. When I asked Grok, the popular AI application built by Elon Musk, the number of people killed with illegal drones by Obama, Bush, and Biden combined, they came up with a credible estimate of 2.2 million. So it's perfectly all right for those on the left of those mass murders, but when Pete Hegseth orders an operation to protect the United States from national drug traffickers in this hemisphere, they try to say that he acted illegally. That really makes you go, Isn't it interesting that so many people who swore up and down that Joe Biden was sharp as a tack, that he was really on top of his game, that he was alert, forceful, and in an excellent condition, when we now know, based on the hearings of the House Oversight Committee, that was a lie, that Joe Biden spent most of his time wearing diapers and being drugged, that he was a veritable vegetable. Those same people now would like you to believe that President Donald Trump is slipping, he's in ill health, and he's near death. I was with him 10 days ago in the Oval Office, This is the same exact Donald Trump that I have now known for 50 years. That's right, 50 years. So it's interesting to me that those who are so quick to say that Trump is in ill health, he isn't. By the way, look at some of the video of him on the golf course yesterday. When it was Joe Biden who was really non-compos mentis virtually the entire time that he was president. I was glad to see the president, Trump, declare that any document, pardon, or other official act signed by the auto pen was null and void. Now, I'm not an attorney. I'm not sure that the president has the authority to do that by executive order. He may. But I do think still that the way to test this is for the government to charge Dr. Anthony Fauci. Now, some argue that Fauci is guilty of crimes against humanity. It's a much larger and more complicated question. But there is no question whatsoever that he lied under oath before Congress when asked by Senator Rand Paul whether or not the U.S. government taxpayers funded the experiments in a Wuhan, China lab for gain of function of the Wuhan virus. He said no. The truth is yes. Therefore, the way to test the auto pen signatures is for the Biden Justice Department, the Trump Justice Department, to charge Dr. Fauci with lying under oath to Congress. Dr. Fauci's lawyers would then respond that he cannot be prosecuted because he was pardoned. And then the question of the auto pen will be where it belongs, in front of a federal court. In the meantime, some of you may have noticed that after many, many years of people urging me to do this, I recently launched my own line of custom-made menswear, a very limited collection. I was immediately attacked by a man named Derek Guy. Well, that's not really his name. He's on X, holds himself out to be an expert on style and fashion. He advocates that men wear skirts. Turns out that Derek Guy is not Derek Guy. The photo he uses in his profile is actually a picture of the incredibly handsome Elliot Richardson, who served as Attorney General under Richard Nixon and Secretary of the Navy, former Attorney General of Massachusetts. Derek Guy is kind of a short, dumpy Chinese guy, and his attacks on my line of clothing, well, they mean I must be doing the right thing. I never thought at my age I would be a Garmento, but here I am. You can find it online. We've produced a limited number of suits, a couple of blazers, some very tasty shirts, but as most folks know, I favor a very full-cut trouser. Kind of tired of my critics calling them baggy pants. No, a great trouser is suspended by a pair of suspenders, what the British call braces, and it's the silhouette that you're looking for. So, yes, my trousers are full cut, but you have to understand the look. In the meanwhile, I want to thank the folks over at Apple for making my cell phone completely and totally non-functional. Suddenly, all of your contacts built up over a 30-year career in American politics, have disappeared entirely. Oh, the thread between you and I, that still pops up with your phone number, forcing me to guess. So when I go to send a message to people who are saved in my contacts, people who have been saved for many years, they're literally gone. I was happy to hear last night, I had dinner with Kara Castronova, who covers the White House for Gateway Pundit and for Lindell Media, that I'm not the only one who has this problem. When we come back, big news, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has announced that he will pardon President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who was framed for drug trafficking in a New York courtroom. Some are apoplectic about this, but I'm going to lay the facts on you. So don't go away. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show right here on the Red Apple Audio Networks.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. There is an election today in Honduras that will determine whether Honduras joins Venezuela and Cuba as an outpost for narco-terrorism. There's already evidence that the current Libra government is involved in drug trafficking, or whether the country of Honduras will return back to the National Party and become an ally of the United States. Former President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who was framed by the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York to try to get him out of the way. Part of the same lawfare that was used against Donald Trump. It was announced yesterday that President Donald Trump will pardon Juan Orlando Hernandez. Hernandez was convicted solely on the testimony of two convicted drug traffickers who were prosecuted under his administration. So this is an act of great justice and courage by President Donald Trump. The people over at the New York Times, by the way, they're not journalists. Those are propagandists and distortionists. Nothing reported by the New York Times is either true or accurate. It was not always so, but it is today. They say that there's some inconsistency between Trump fighting drug trafficking in Venezuela and this act of courage in which he announced the pardon of Juan Orlando Hernandez. Later on in the program, Juan Orlando Hernandez, the soon-to-be pardoned former president of Honduras' wife, Ana Garcia de Hernandez, his daughter, Ana Danielle Hernandez, and his other daughter, Isabella Hernandez, will join us right here on the Roger Stone Show to talk about the great lack of justice and the vicious lawfare that was used against their father. I was able to get a hold of a letter that was written by former President Hernandez, who points out that he was recklessly attacked by leftist forces who could not stand the fact that he had stood up to the narco-terrorists, so they framed him. This is the story. He was tried in a kangaroo court after being extradited by the corrupt Biden regime. Hernandez was framed for being a drug criminal by the very men that he put behind bars for drug trafficking, some of whom were allowed to walk free today despite committing brutal murders and trafficking tons of cocaine in the United States. Kamala Harris actually went down to the Honduras to celebrate the election of Hernandez's successor, Xiomara Castro, the communist Libre Party candidate who was put into power in this coup, despite the fact that members of the Libre Party and even in Castro's own family were caught on video negotiating drug bribes. But Damian Williams, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York under Joe Biden, the one who prosecuted Ghislaine Maxwell without naming any co-conspirators, the one who prosecuted P. Diddy without naming any prosecutor, Mr. Cover-Up himself, framed Juan Orlando Hernandez in this horrific case of injustice, and now President Donald Trump has stood up and corrected that great error. How it affects the elections going on right now in Honduras today, well, that remains to be seen. We will know later tonight. But when I read the compelling story of the way Hernandez was framed and the fact that he got a 45-year sentence, despite a lack of any evidence other than the sworn testimony of two convicted drug dealers who got a get-out-of-jail-free card in return for their testimony, I was reminded of my own Soviet-style show trial in Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, NBC has a story about a reassessment of the presidency of Richard M. Nixon, and joining us to talk about that is a man who knew President Nixon very, very well as President Ronald Reagan. Ken Kachigian joins us right here on the Roger Stone Show. He's written a terrific book about that entire topic, and he's going to talk to us about his book, Behind Closed Doors in the Room with Reagan and Nixon, but also his broader view on this reassessment of our 37th president.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. NBC had a terrific piece last week raising the question of whether the persona, the presidency, and Watergate itself, all of which took place under Richard Nixon, is being historically reassessed. As I believe it should be. Richard Nixon is, of course, the man who ended the war in Vietnam, reached a strategic arms limitation agreement with the Soviets, opened the door to China back when China was a dirt-poor agrarian society with no technology and not much of a military, ended the military draft, unilaterally saved Israel from complete annihilation in the 1973 war, gave us the Environmental Protection Agency, our first federal environmental protection history. It was a consequential and very great presidency. There is no better person to weigh in on this than Ken Khachigian. Ken Khachigian served as a speechwriter for both candidate Nixon, President Nixon, and then went on to serve as a key speechwriter for my other favorite president, Ronald Reagan. Ken Khachigian was very senior to me in both the Nixon and Reagan campaigns, someone that I looked up to then and I look up to now. He has written a terrific book entitled Behind Closed Doors, In the Room with Reagan and Nixon. If you love politics and you admire either one or both of these presidents, I cannot recommend this book as a Christmas present for you more than anything you could possibly enjoy. You can get it, by the way, by going to ReaganandNixon.com. We'll talk about the book. But first I want to ask Ken Khachigian, who joins us now. Ken, what do you think of this long-due reassessment of the presidency of Richard Nixon and also the efforts to get the truth about Watergate out?
Oh, Roger, it's critically important. We've been waiting for this for years, and a lot of this has been due to my colleague's work. Jeff Shepard has been working on this for years. I give him a lot of credit. He's written a couple of books on this, one of them, The Nixon Conspiracy, and he's uncovered a great deal of the corruption that took place in the special prosecutor's office and uncovered the corruption, the absolute corruption of Judge Sirica and that of the two special prosecutors, Archibald Cox and Leon Jaworski. So there and all the maneuverings that took place among the staff of the special prosecutor's office, the unethical conduct that took place with the members of the special prosecutors who met secretly with Judge Sirica without the defense attorneys being present. The shenanigans that took place where the members of the Senate Watergate Committee met secretly with Judge Sirica to set up the defendants who were going to testify at the Senate Watergate Committee that would have harsh sentences set down by Judge Sirica so that they would set up the testimony against Nixon's staff. I mean, it's one thing after another, Roger, that's come out over the last few years, and more is going to come out because that whole special prosecution staff was run by Bobby Kennedy's Justice Department, all out to get Richard Nixon. Lawfare began during Watergate, I guarantee you.
No, you're absolutely right about that. Terrific piece by James Rosen, who was with Fox, so spied on by the Obama administration, a journalist wiretapped and whose emails were being monitored. Didn't hear the left going crazy about that. But a great piece by James Rosen for Real Clear Politics, in which he reveals that declassified documents demonstrate definitively that the Central Intelligence Agency knew about the Watergate break-in well in advance, and thanks to the work of many, we now know that at least 4 of the Watergate burglars were still on the payroll of the CIA. I interviewed Eugenio Martinez, then 91 years old, still with us, by the way, one of the Watergate burglars living in Miami, who admitted that he was working for the agency at the time of the break-in, tried to swallow the key to the desk drawer, where it was alleged that a portfolio of prostitutes who this DNC was using for dignitaries coming to town was being kept that may have had information embarrassing to John Dean. I don't want to get off too much on Watergate other than to say that I agree with you when you say the same forces that took Richard Nixon down in a silent coup for many of the same reasons, because, as you know from his memoirs, also from the diaries of his chief of staff, Bob Haldeman, was his intention to completely reorganize the national security apparatus to take power away from unelected officials that had gotten into the hands of unelected bureaucrats. I think that was his sin. His other great sin was he was a peacemaker. I think that many in the deep state thought when he was elected he was going to be the ultimate Cold Warrior, but as Nixon himself said, the greatest single title that history can bestow is that of peacemaker. Your book is something I highly recommend to anyone who's interested in politics, who likes Presidents Reagan or Nixon. That book, again, is called Behind Closed Doors, In the Room with Reagan and Nixon by Ken Kachiki, and you can find it on Amazon if you wish, but I suggest you go to ReaganandNixon.com, ReaganandNixon.com. If you love politics, this is the book for you, because Ken reveals, as never before, as an eyewitness who was actually there, an inside perspective on two of the most important men in history, Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan, the inside story of their presidencies. He was a trusted advisor, counselor, speechwriter to two of the Cold War's presidential lions. This book is fascinating. You'll have trouble putting it down. I recommend it to you. Ken, you were the speechwriter behind the famous phrase in which Ronald Reagan really put away Jimmy Carter when he famously said, "Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago?" I remember the hair on the back of my neck standing up watching that debate and watching that line. Tell us about that.
Well, that goes back to early October in 1980, and actually that line didn't just pop up in that debate. We were searching and searching. We weren't doing well in that campaign in 3 weeks before the election, and we were campaigning in Pennsylvania, and I was the chief speechwriter in that campaign for Governor Reagan at the time, and Jimmy Carter, and I was always searching for a line that would resonate for Reagan in one of his rallies, and Jimmy Carter had put out a pamphlet saying that the economy was going well and things were actually doing better than they were, and we grabbed onto that the pamphlet, and so I came up with the line, look at inflation, it was 18% and unemployment was like 10, 8, 9% at the time, and so I came up with that line somehow, jumped out of my typewriter, and I said, look around you and ask yourself, are you better off today than you were in 1976? So that was the genesis of the line, Roger. Are you better off today than you were in 1976? That was October 7th, 1980 at the Oxford Mall in Langhorne, Pennsylvania. That's where that line was born. And then Reagan loved it. And that rally at the Oxford Mall, and people cheered, and then he used it again at rallies all across the country for the next 2-3 weeks. And then when he got to that debate, he saw that it resonated, and then he just tweaked it just a little bit and changed it to, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And bam, and right between Carter's eyes. So that's how that line was born. It's become the most iconic political line in politics.
You were keenly aware of Richard Nixon's both mastery and fascination with politics. You knew him before I did, but I got to experience it firsthand as well. People really don't understand the extent to which Nixon was quietly advising his old friend Ronald Reagan through that 1980 campaign. All of those memos, some of which I know you worked on, those strategic memos I have copies of because the president thoughtfully would send them to me. Knew I was running the campaign in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Tell us about Nixon's backstage role, because I think it's fascinating. It's one of the things in your book that no one actually knows about.
That's right, and that's why I hope people will get my book, Roger, because these are secret memos that, especially in the 1980 campaign, that were never revealed before until I wrote my book. And I can't go into every single one of them because they're long, 10, 11, 12-page memos. But nobody knew about Nixon's secret advice to Ronald Reagan in the 1980 campaign. And that was mainly because, frankly, Nixon was a little bit toxic because of Watergate. And we couldn't let it be known that he was helping out Reagan. But he was secretly telephoning me all through the campaign in September and October and passing along advice to me to pass along to Reagan. But then he wanted to give him some really strong advice through not just telephone calls, but he wanted to write a memo. So Nick Ruey was his chief of staff then in New York. So Nick called me on the campaign trail, and I was in Kansas City, and he said, the boss wants to pass along a memo. And so he gave himself a secret name, Mr. Hudson. And it was like a CIA agent meeting with the KGB. I described this all in the book in great detail, how I had to go 2 blocks away from my hotel and have this secret meeting with Nick Ruey so I could pass along this memo from Nixon over to Reagan. And then Nixon also sent a second memo advising Reagan on the debate with Jimmy Carter. These are fascinating memos, Roger, because Nixon was advising Reagan on what issues to hit in the 1980 campaign, and then at just about every other stop, Nixon we would arrange a phone call where he would pass along advice to me by phone, and then I would pass it along to Stu Spencer, who was managing the campaign. So people never knew about how Nixon was secretly passing along advice to Reagan, and I detail it in great detail in the book because I was keeping tape-recorded diaries in a little mini cassette tape recorder that even the campaign didn't know about it. So I detail it in great detail in the book.
You were the last of the holdouts. You opposed the president's decision to resign. You were one of the few to go with
Right.
San Clemente. Let me read this, a quote from President Nixon himself. It comes from his book, In the Arena, A Memoir of Victory, Defeat, and Renewal. He writes, "Those first 4 years in San Clemente were profoundly difficult and painful. I succeeded in recovering physically, spiritually, mentally from the cataclysmic defeat I suffered in 1974. As I look back over those years in the wilderness, I would say that I was sustained by always bearing in mind these 3 principles. First, put the past behind you. Analyze and understand the reasons for your defeat, but do not become obsessed with what was lost. Think instead of what is left to do. Secondly, do not let your critics get to you. Remember that they win only if they divert you into fighting them rather than driving towards your goals. And thirdly, devote your time to a goal larger than yourself. Avoid the temptation of living simply for pleasure or striving only to leave a larger estate." Ken, I've got to tell you, those 3 rules sustained me through a very difficult period in my life. When we come back, I'm going to ask you to reflect upon them. Meanwhile, folks, I want to remind you again, if you love politics and you are interested in political history and you want the real inside story of both Presidents Reagan and Nixon, get Ken Kachigian's book. It's called Behind Closed Doors, In the Room with Reagan and Nixon. You can get it by going to ReaganandNixon.com. ReaganandNixon.com. This is the perfect Christmas gift for the political junkie in your family or anyone interested in how the real world of politics looks. Ken Kachigian had a front row seat to history, and he reveals things that, well, even I didn't know about 2 of the presidents that I love the most. He calls out the pragmatists. He is a true conservative, a true keeper of the flame, a man always prepared to present the truth. This book is absolute must reading for anyone who cares about the truth, American history, whether it is Watergate, whether it is Reagan's great triumph over Jimmy Carter and his triumphant presidency. We'll be right back with more of Ken Kachigian, so whatever you do, don't touch that dial.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back. We're talking to Ken Kachigian, who served as a speechwriter for Presidents Richard Nixon and President Ronald Reagan. Ken, one of my fondest political memories from the 1984 campaign when you were serving as the Issues and Research Director, Chief Speechwriter, and a Senior Political Advisor to President Reagan. I was serving, reprising my role as the Political Director for the Northeastern states, including New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, all the way up through New England. They gave me Pennsylvania and Ohio. That was President Nixon's idea. He said, give Stone Ohio, he's an animal. But one of my fondest memories was that train trip that we took through Ohio when Mike Deaver gave me the assignment of keeping former Governor Jim Rhodes away from Reagan. That was my job because Rhodes had his own ideas of campaign strategy. I'm going to ask you the question many people ask me. It's a simple one. What was Ronald Reagan really like? Was he the same guy we saw on television and in public?
Well, he was. No person is the same in public as he is in private, Roger. I mean, Ronald Reagan had his private moments. His closest person in his life was Nancy, of course. There was no one closer to him than Nancy Reagan. And but you know, there's times when the Ronald Reagan you saw in public was the same guy you saw in private. And he and I had such wonderful times together when he was telling jokes and we were laughing together about good old times. And he would tell stories about Hollywood and tell stories about some of the old movies he was in, and especially about his rivalry with Errol Flynn and movies like Santa Fe Trail, or tell these stories about when he was broadcasting the Chicago Cubs at the station in Des Moines, Iowa, and when he was in Hollywood and some of the movies he played, and telling jokes about Bob Hope and things like that. But then there were serious times. That's what I liked when I sat down with him too. When he talked about how the crusade he was on, and that's what Ronald Reagan was the same in private as he was in public. How he was involved in a great crusade to change America. How he felt there was a great, not a burden on his shoulder, but that he felt that the presidency was so important that he came to Washington, as he said in the first cabinet meeting, we came to do things differently. And one day in Camp David, he said, he and I were sitting on the patio working on a couple of speeches, and he said, Ken, he said, you know, we've got this great crusade, and he said, some of the fellows don't understand that we can't let up on this effort to change the economy, to get the grip on how the government is so oppressive, and that we've got to get change, we've got to cut taxes, and we've got this crusade that we've got to move forward. And he felt that even his own staff didn't understand economics like he did, that the government has grown too much and takes too much of our money and takes too much in taxes, and that it's overregulates. And so that was, but he did that in private as well as public. So, but then there were times that he just liked to, have private time to himself, Roger, that he, and I never blamed him for that, where he just liked to be let alone. And I think everybody likes to be private and have time to themselves, and just where he and Nancy just wanted to be together and not be bothered by staff.
Ken Kachighian has written the single best political book of the year. In fact, he's been nominated for a Pulitzer Prize in U.S. history and memoir writing. The Washington Post has refused to review this book. That's all the more reason why you should go buy it right now. The book, once again, is called Behind Closed Doors: In the Room with Reagan and Nixon by Ken Kachighian. You could get it on Amazon, but I recommend you go to ReaganandNixon.com, ReaganandNixon.com. If you love politics, if you loved Ronald Reagan or Richard Nixon or both of them, if you want to see the inside of how a presidential campaign really works and how history was made in the name of freedom and liberty, get this book today. Again, Behind Closed Doors: In the Room with Reagan and Nixon. You can get it by going to ReaganandNixon.com. Ken, thanks for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Oh, thanks a lot, Roger.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. For many months, at least 6 months, I have written extensively about the persecution of former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who I believe was framed for drug trafficking on the basis of really no evidence whatsoever in a politically motivated act of lawfare by the Biden administration. These are the exact same tactics that were used against President Donald Trump himself by the illicit and unconstitutional investigation of Jack Smith. And I had great sympathy for President Hernandez, who was framed not because there was evidence that he was actually involved in drug trafficking, but framed to get him out of the way, to make way for the narco-Marxist regime to take power in Honduras. There's an election in Honduras today, but that's not what I'm really here to talk about. On Friday, I got from the investigative journalist Shane Trejo a letter that President Hernandez wrote to President Trump. It was an extraordinarily compelling 9-page letter, which frankly broke my heart because I have been where President Hernandez was. I know what it is to be persecuted and have the full power and the unlimited financial and legal capacity of a corrupted, politicized Justice Department come after you, as well as the complicity of the mainstream media, who never wants to pick apart the charges against him and just takes everything for granted. I found it interesting that the U.S. attorney in this question was Damian Williams, the same Biden-appointed U.S. attorney who couldn't find any co-conspirators in the case of Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's pimp. Couldn't find any co-conspirators in the trial of P. Diddy. Really botched that trial badly in a cover-up because, well, the elites he would have had to indict brought you right to the door of the Democrat Party. I was delighted about 3 hours after I sent a copy of this letter to President Trump to read on Truth Social that he had announced the full and unconditional pardon for Juan Orlando Hernandez. I think this is fitting. This is justice. Now, the U.S.-based media has gone completely insane because they refuse to look at the facts regarding the persecution and trial of Juan Orlando Hernandez. And to them, they say, well, why is Trump pursuing the Venezuelan dictatorship over drug trafficking at the same time that he's releasing a drug trafficker? To which I say, there is no shred of evidence other than the testimony of convicted drug traffickers, people that Juan Orlando Hernandez himself's government prosecuted, that would tie the former president to drug trafficking. He is an innocent man who was a target and victim of lawfare. And anyone who will examine his trial and the charges against him and the sham trial that they ran in New York would realize that. Joining us now is the former First Lady of Honduras, Ana Garcia de Hernandez, President Hernandez's daughter, Ana Danielle Hernandez, and his other daughter, Isabella Hernandez. I want to welcome you to the Roger Stone Show, and I want to tell you how incredibly proud I am to have played just a small role in the justice that has now been meted out for your father and for your country and for your family.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Stone. This is Anna. We are so grateful because of what's happening to our family. We would like to say thank you for hosting us on your radio show today. It's truly a pleasure speaking with you. We also want to express our heartfelt gratitude for the support that you have given to my husband and the father of my daughters. Since you start speaking about this case, you made such a huge difference. Because, as you say, you suffered the same that my husband is suffering or was suffering before President Trump decided to give him a full pardon. So thank you, because thank you to your efforts. In part, Juan Orlando will be soon a free man An innocent man has been pardoned and will finally be reunited with our family. So we are really deeply grateful with that.
Hi, Mr. Stone. I join my mom in thanking you for all that you've done. I mean, since you started investigating and publishing the articles, you've made such a difference in the narrative. So we want to thank you, and if you allow us, also start by thanking God as well, because he has been so faithful. From the bottom of our hearts, we also want to thank President Trump. So I'll just give him a message. Thank you, President Trump, for pardoning our father, Orlando Hernandez, and for correcting this grave injustice. We thank God because God is good, and we also thank the Holy Spirit for touching your heart. We are so deeply grateful to all of the friends like you, Mr. Stone, who supported this case, prayed for our family, and helped bring this case before President Trump.
Yeah, for almost 4 long years, we prayed for this miracle. And today we're so grateful to see that that prayer has been answered. My father is an innocent man who was wrongfully convicted, and he was politically persecuted. So thanks to President Trump, our family will be whole again. Thanks to you, Mr. Stone, and to all the friends and family worldwide that have been there with us. President Trump, you have given us the chance to hug our father again, to stand with him, and to no longer be separated from the men that we as daughters, every child needs their father. So with all the sincerity in our hearts, may God bless President Trump, his family. May God bless you, Mr. Stone, the United States, President Trump's administration in Honduras. Because if there's something we can say is that God is good, and that we will be forever grateful for this beautiful gift that we have received.
I completely agree with your view that the person or the entity we must thank is God Almighty. It was only my own redemption in Jesus Christ that allowed me to survive a similar ordeal. It's interesting to me that the Washington Monthly mocked my public profession of faith. When I said, they asked me, what are you going to do? How are you going to survive this? I said that I was praying. I was praying fervently that President Trump would recognize that I didn't do anything wrong, that I was being pressured, I was being persecuted because I refused to offer false testimony against Donald Trump. See, after they spent $30 million, they came up empty-handed. They could find no Russian collusion with his campaign because, well, none existed. They also couldn't find any collaboration with WikiLeaks, despite the very popular narrative put forward by the fake news media. But I reached a point where I hit rock bottom. I was under the quaint idea that I would actually get a fair trial, that justice would actually be heard. I didn't realize that I would have an epically corrupted judge and epically corrupted prosecutors who, in my case, as in the case of your father, Juan Orlando Hernandez, hid exculpatory evidence and promoted lies by people who got a get-out-of-jail-free card. I didn't realize that they would strip me of all my constitutional rights, including my right to free speech. I was gagged during my trial. I couldn't even defend myself on radio or cable or television. And you ask yourself, how can this happen in the United States? So now when I go to church or when I speak openly about my faith, some on the left continue to mock me. But see, I really don't care. I don't care what they think. I only care what he thinks. That's all I care.
Amen. Amen.
And God has seen you through this terrific trial. Your father writes, and I think this is true, the politicization and selective application of justice in his case is undeniable. Even high-ranking radical left leaders in Honduras have publicly admitted that his trial was political and unfair. He was prosecuted without any solid evidence based on the testimonies of violent convicted traffickers and professional liars, the testimonies motivated by revenge and get-out-of-jail deals. Importantly, evidence later revealed that several of these criminals, even prior to and during their interactions with U.S. officials, had sought to entrap others and fabricate evidence that they could subsequently offer to the Department of Justice in exchange for reduced sentences. Some of these efforts succeeded, others failed, and in certain cases, individuals voluntarily participated in criminal acts. yet they were never able to prove anything against your father. He, like me, was a victim of what we call lawfare. The truth is that as a congressman, Speaker of Congress, and throughout his presidential administration, no one took a harder line against drug traffickers. No one had a better record of fighting drug trafficking. No one was more hated by the narco traffickers. That's why it was so outrageous that evidence of his great record of fighting drug trafficking was blocked by the prosecution and the judge during his rigged trial in New York City. His defense was further complicated by ineffective assistance of counsel, as his retained lawyer was ill, failed to subpoena crucial witnesses, and had actually stopped communicating him, while the court-appointed counsel was given only 3 weeks to prepare for the trial. After 3 days of my trial, by the way, I wanted to represent myself. I realized that my defense attorneys had either been compromised or intimidated, and frankly, I couldn't do worse than they did. They offered no defense at all. I spent 8 months preparing evidence, videos, audios, emails, encrypted text messages that would have proved definitively that there was no Russian collusion or WikiLeaks collaboration in my case. Yet I was railroaded because I refused to turn and bear false witness against President Donald Trump. So ladies, I celebrate with you today. I thank you for joining us on the Roger Stone Show. God bless you and your family. God bless the former president. I am very proud of the tiny role that I played here in getting justice for you and your family. And today there is an election in Honduras. Today I pray that the nation will return to the National Party, to the party of liberty and freedom, to the party that is opposed to the Marxist narco drug dealers. And ladies, thank you so much for joining us today in the Roger Stone Show. I hope to visit Honduras, and when I do, I hope to meet you personally, not so you can thank me, but so I can thank you for going through this terrible, terrible trial, only to see justice and accountability in the name of Jesus Christ our Lord. Thank you, ladies, for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. God bless you.
All right, folks, you're listening to The Roger Stone Show right here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. And when we come back, we'll be talking about the fact that Volodymyr Zelensky, a man who's been pocketing millions of dollars sent to him by the United States to fight the war, may be on his last legs. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show, and we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. Well, the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, is finally starting to feel the heat. After years as the golden boy of the globalists, Zelensky thought he could do no wrong. Thought he could embezzle money, snort cocaine, spend money on his other vices, enrich his cronies, send his people to the front line to be chopped up in a meat grinder, puff out his chest in these choreographed speeches like he's John Rambo for Eastern Europe. He, by the way, is an actor and a comedian. I'm convinced of being paid millions, perhaps tens of millions, to play the role of a president. On Thursday, maybe it was Wednesday, I drove down to Miami Beach to look at the $3.8 million beachfront condominium that the former actor owns. I wonder where the money came from to pay for that. Zelensky's chief of staff, Andrei Yermak, resigned last year after anti-corruption investigators searched his home and stormed the presidential office. This may be part of the Anti-Corruption Bureau's investigation into a $100 million embezzlement scandal in Ukraine. Think Hunter Biden Burisma on steroids here. Businessman Timur Mindich is at the center of the scandal. Mindich reportedly blew the money he received as part of this $100 million heist, those are U.S. taxpayer monies, on a gold-plated toilet. He and Zelensky go way back, as they were partners in the entertainment industry for years before Zelensky was hired to play the part of a president. The two men remained very close. It's no longer plausible that Zelensky is unrelated to all of this corruption surrounding him. Without any shadow of a doubt, he's the kingpin of all of it, if you ask me. Even in this position, Zelensky still drags his feet on agreeing to President Trump's peace deal, which is more than generous to the diminutive little fraudster. If Zelensky doesn't come to terms with an agreement soon, he's going to lose every dollar of aid from the United States, and there'll be nothing left stopping his country from total defeat in the war against Russia. And then the people will come for Zelensky's head in the reckoning. Please don't tell me that this is about democracy. Zelensky has, as I have pointed out, continually postponed and delayed presidential elections. That's because he knows if they have elections, he will lose. There's something very, very dark afoot in America today. I see it unfolding. To me, it's like deja vu. I saw it in 1974 when I believe there was an illicit coup to take out Richard Nixon. His big mistake was that he was for peace. He ended the war in Vietnam, and he was talking, you can see this in his memoirs and in the diaries of his chief of staff, H.R. Bob Haldeman. He was going to completely reorganize the national security apparatus to limit the power of the deep state. Now you have what I think is a CIA-led coup by the seditious Six, what they call an orange revolution. And America is in for very difficult times, as I think they will mount a violent revolution to try to displace the duly elected president of the United States. After all, they tried to destroy him in the phony Russian collusion hoax. They tried to impeach him twice in two completely fraudulent impeachments. Then they tried to bankrupt him, keep him off the ballot, and lock him up. And when none of those things worked, well, they tried to shoot and kill him. But through the grace of God, he's come through it all. But whether it is Alex Jones or whether it's now Jesse Waters on Fox, people see something much larger is afoot. The groundwork is being laid through the seditious Six, traitors like Senators Slotkin and Kelly, telling their members of our armed services that they don't have to respect and obey orders from the commander-in-chief. Coming up right here in the Roger Stone Show, General Michael Flynn, the National Security Advisor under Donald Trump, and one of the most broadest geopolitical thinkers and one of the greatest patriots it's ever been my privilege to know, joins us to lay out why he thinks America is heading towards a violent color revolution. You're not going to want to miss this. Whatever you do, please don't touch the dial, because we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. In an almost 50-year career in the political arena, I have had the privilege to work for 3 American presidents, scores of U.S. senators, governors, members of Congress, and others. But I have never known any finer patriotic American, no finer leader, no finer geopolitical thinker, and no more brilliant military and geopolitical strategist than my good friend, General Michael Flynn. 3-star General Mike Flynn served our country for more than 33 years in the U.S. military, went on to serve as the Director of Defense Intelligence, the nation's highest-serving military intelligence officer, and then, of course, served as the National Security Advisor to the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump. General Flynn and I were both persecuted in the same courtroom by the same people. We didn't actually meet each other until our fates were over, our trials were over, but I become a very close friend of not only General Flynn and every member of his family. They are all, in their own right, outstanding patriots, and it is my great honor to enter him, to welcome him today. 2 things I do want to say. His new book, Pardon of Innocence, is available. It's terrific. You can get it by going to generalflynn.com. And if you haven't seen the documentary Flynn, you absolutely must. You can see that by going to flynnmovie.com. General Flynn, thank you so much for joining us today on the Roger Stone Show.
100%, Roger, and thank you so much for such a heartfelt introduction. And I'm really looking forward to having a discussion with you and your audience today. It's a really, really important time off the heels of what should have been a great Thanksgiving and instead turned out to be a real tragedy, I think, for the country. You know, with the assassination or murder of this wonderful young West Virginia National Guardsmen. I mean, and here we are all day. That's all that's been talked about on the Sunday talk show circuit. Instead of we should be talking about great things that President Trump is doing for the country, and yet we're talking about this tragedy. So we're in a different place, Roger, and I know that you feel that, your audience feels that. That's why they love listening to you. And our country is in a weird spot right now. And I won't go on and on because I know you got some specific things you want to talk about, but I think everybody feels it. I've been following the news very closely the last few days, as I do every day, and getting updates from, frankly, all around the world. But anyway, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about some of the bigger strategic issues that are going on. I'll stop there.
Yeah, before we leave this topic, I just find it very strange, based on my research, Rahmanullah Lakanwal, the man who's accused of shooting these two fine U.S. Army National Guardsmen in D.C., very clearly did work for the Central Intelligence Agency in Afghanistan, came to the United States in 2021. By law, he had 1 year to apply for asylum, but he didn't. He didn't apply and get asylum until 2024. Now, how could that be? Unless, of course, he was still working for the Central Intelligence Agency, which is what I suspect. So let's go to the big picture, then I'm going to let you take the floor, because I watched your terrific broadcast with our friend Alex Jones, and I reposted it because I think you hit it on the head. America is headed for some very dark event, in my opinion, a color revolution, as it were. They can't and will not accept the outcome of the last presidential election. They're determined to overturn it by any means necessary. And America's in very, very dangerous position today. General, you have the floor.
Yeah. So first of all, on this gentleman, I don't know why I call him that, but Lakanwal Rahmanullah, on that specific person, I want your audience to know that this guy was part of an organization, part of a small unit, very specialized unit that were expertly trained on a range of capabilities. For example, many in that unit, and the units that were like them in Afghanistan that were trained by our CIA and continue to be monitored by the CIA. They're trained in our Ranger School, in our Special Forces Green Beret TAB training, our Airborne Operations Sniper School. I understand that this particular individual was also trained in enhanced interrogation techniques. I mean, this guy had some very, very specialized training. So I don't want anybody to think that this character just went off the deep end, drove 3,000 miles from the state of Washington and just randomly went up to a soldier dressed in BDUs and shot her. In this case, no, this was a very intentional hit, meant to be done the day before Thanksgiving. So we would be talking about that instead of Thanksgiving and football. So it was a very, very precisely timed. The individual is somebody who was, I would call him a sleeper cell type. There are many more like him. What you just said about being over a year on his extended visa or whatever, these guys should be continuously monitored by the CIA, and if they're not continuously monitored by the CIA then has a responsibility to turn them over to the FBI. So there's a lot of what I would call line of duty investigational stuff that has to occur, activities that have to occur before I'm satisfied. As a guy that's done many line of duties on in the death of a soldier, let's say, there's got to be a lot more answers here for what we're dealing with. Because is this guy, one off? And my answer to your audience is that he is not. This is not a lone wolf individual guy that just did this randomly. There are more than likely many more like him in our country. So that takes me to the next sort of bigger picture. And this is what I talked about the other day, and I stated it that like this, that we're in the midst of a very serious and very dangerous color revolution. And a color revolution is something that has a whole series of characteristics, right? It's got physical components, and this action against this targeted action against this National Guardsman is one of those physical components. But other physical components could be the derailing of a train. It could be cyber attacks, which are are physical in nature, and we see those almost routinely to the point of where we've just become immune to some of these. And many of these cyber attacks are huge. And for those that want to know a lot more about cyber attacks, they can go listen to Mike Benz. Mike Benz, on about a weekly basis, is briefing briefing the country on another cyber event that has occurred that is significant. I mean, to the point of where we are losing capabilities each time we get attacked, particularly by the Chinese Communist Party. So, and it's this whole narrative. And in the past, what used to be psychological operations, and I mean very thorough psychological operations that we ran certainly we ran them during World War II, and then they were more refined in the 1950s and 1960s. Our OSS used to be masters at psychological operations, and there's some of the people that designed some of our psyops during World War II against the Nazis and against imperialist Japan. But when we fast forward to today, this hasn't gone away, and now we refer to these things as color revolutions, right? And the different color revolutions that we've seen in places like Eastern Europe, Ukraine, Poland, Yugoslavia, and other places out in the Asia Pacific theater like the Philippines. So we've had these revolutions that have occurred, and what they have similar characteristics, and some of those characteristics is rigged elections, right? Rigged elections is one of the big characteristics of any color revolution. When an entity gets in charge, like what happened in case of the United States government, one of the things that they do is they add layers of bureaucracy along with layers of non-governmental organizations. So that's a really important point, because when Donald J. Trump came into the presidency and he started to tear apart organizations like USAID, right? So USAID was an agency inside of the United States government, the executive branch of the government. And what did USAID do? What did we learn about USAID? So not only were they added to in terms of the scale of their bureaucracy, USAID then added a bunch of non-governmental organizations all over the world. And when we look back and deeply into USAID, not just under the Biden administration, but all the way back to really the 90s during the Clinton administration as well, we start to see the growth of these non-governmental organizations, and they're placed in key locations around the world: Asia, Europe, the Middle East, Africa, Eastern Europe, the Southeast Asian countries. And you find these NGOs that are there, and they are getting funding through USAID, and you say to yourself, well, what's the funding for? And when you dig in, it's funding to overthrow, in many cases, those governments, or to certainly influence those governments, supposedly for what's in the best interest of the United States of America. But what we're learning, and what people are now waking up to, and I think that's why the CIA was trending all day today on the world of social media, is because the CIA has been driving foreign policy, and I'm going to say that a little bit louder. The CIA has been driving foreign policy for many, many decades now. But what we now have learned through a whole bunch of releases of FOIA documents, evidence from the Mueller investigation, evidence from many other investigations that have taken place, that the CIA has been working hand in glove and in a very surreptitious way with, frankly, components of our FBI inside of the United States government. And they did it to undermine President Donald J. Trump's first administration. So, of course, he won in 2016, which was a shock to the world and a good thing for our country, thank God. But then they really went hard after him. And then what did they do next? Then they stole an election, the election of 2020. And more is going to come out about this stolen election. I know that President Trump has a plan to expose in a great way exactly what happened during 2020 and also 2024. So these are components about when you talk about adding these layers of bureaucracy, adding these layers of non-governmental organizations that then in many cases come back and bite us in the rear end. Another big chunk of this is this to either start or extend wars or conflicts around the world, right? So, Ukraine. Now, Trump's working really hard to stop, to come to some sort of long-term peace agreement here in Eastern Europe. But this Eastern European war between Russia and Ukraine, this is just an extension of efforts that are going on directed really against the United States of America. You say, well, how can that be? The war's over there. Well, the war is costing us. It has cost the United States of America not only global prestige, but it's also cost us over $500 billion with a B dollars in the last number of years. And we know with some of the recent current developments with Yermak, who's the chief of staff to Zelensky, having his place was raided the other day. We know this. I mean, I know this. So I'm telling your audience personally right now because in another part of my life, we have a civil case right now, whistleblower case that's been filed. It's a $42 billion whistleblower case. So we're trying to recover that money, which was absconded from U.S. taxpayers through USAID into non-governmental organizations over into Eastern Europe. And then much of that money found its way to different parts of Europe and also back here into the United States. So that part is really ugly, but that's an extension of how a color revolution is put into play. It's this continuation or this, in some cases, beginning a new conflict around the world. So we have these other, we can go back to Afghanistan, go back to Iraq. We can go back to many, many examples. Vietnam is another classic example of one that happened before we really started talking about color revolutions. We were talking about psychological operations or false flags, right? We use the term false flag. So those are other aspects. Another key component here of a color revolution is to drain or certainly rob the coffers of the U.S. Treasury. And that's what's been happening. So the left in our country, in some collusion with members of the right, and Crystal is one of them. You know him. I mean, yes. I don't know him well, but I watch him enough and listen to him enough. But you have a hard neocon right that loves the war, loves these conflicts, and they just love to continue to spend more of our hard-earned dollars. Well, the left looks at our U.S. Treasury as their U.S. Treasury, and what they want to do is they want to get more of that money out of our Treasury, out of taxpayers to put into their own pockets. And they've been doing that for years to the tune of trillions of dollars. So,
General Flynn, we're going to have to take a quick break here. When we come back, I have my doubts as to whether there are going to be any prosecutions in the Russian collusion hoax that upended your life, my life, the life of President Donald Trump and others. We'll talk about that when we get back. Whatever you do, folks, don't go away. We'll be right back with General Michael Flynn right here on The Roger Stone Show.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we return to our interview with General Michael Flynn, a man who I'm convinced his greatest public service lies yet ahead. General Flynn, I have a concern that those who enacted the greatest single dirty trick, the greatest single abuse of power in American history, the Russian collusion hoax, will not be punished by our Justice Department. And that will be a disincentive for those who support the America First agenda to turn out for this vitally important midterm election. But I want you to finish telling us about the plans that we both believe are afoot for a color revolution, a violent uprising in this country, and more importantly, what the American people can do about it.
Yeah, 100%, Roger, and thank you for having me. Yeah, so just again, what is a color revolution? It's a very sneaky, insidious overthrow, of an elected government. That's kind of the basic definition, and that is what's happening here inside of our country. And they tried to do it while Trump was in office the first time. They obviously did it in 2020, and they put in, what amounted to a person who was essentially incapable of being president, in this case Biden, and now they're continuing to do it. It is not stopping, and you're right. I am very, very concerned because we're not seeing the momentum that we need, particularly with the scale of the conspiracy that happened during the 2016, 2017 timeframe with Donald Trump, the conspiracy by Barack Obama, where he committed treason along with others. I mean, this is stated by our Director of National Intelligence, the great Tulsi Gabbard, and President of the United States. So we're already 9.5 months into this administration, and we have not seen really anything. I mean, the indictment and the dismissal of the Comey case is not a good sign of things to come when it comes to Russiagate. So, yeah, I'm very concerned. So everything that we're talking about, though, these days, all are elements of what this thing is, and this is a revolution ongoing in our country. There's Victor Davis Hanson is another friend who talks about a counter-revolution. That's what the MAGA movement is. And really, what I'm concerned about as we go into the 2026 election, and you remember Ronald Reagan, Ronald Reagan said, we're one generation away from losing our freedom. Well, we're not one generation anymore. We are that generation. We're actually one election away from losing everything. If the left gets back in charge, I don't use words like Democrat anymore because they're not the Democrat Party of old, right? This is a left-leaning socialist communist party that now exists, and that's the part of what I call the axis of resistance. It's communism, Islamism. It's they're in cahoots with criminal and terrorist networks. So this is what we are facing if we don't continue to stay strong and stay engaged and push President Trump and his team to do more. I got that. But how do we defeat this, right? What is it that, I get this question all the time, as I'm sure you do. What can I do? So now I'm speaking to every member of the audience. What is it that I can do? The best way to defeat something like this is at the local level. And many people have heard me use the phrase local action equals a national impact. First thing that we have to remember is that we pledge allegiance to a republic. We don't pledge allegiance to a democracy, right? I pledge allegiance to the republic, right? And that's what we have to remember what we are, because you're going to hear people say that Trump is a danger to democracy. Well, we're not a democracy. We are a republic. The second thing is we really strategically have to guard our freedom from this growing darkness. So how do we fight back? We don't want to rely on one man, folks. Donald Trump is doing everything that he can. I know that he's pushing his administration to do everything that they can. And I think we're going to see in the next couple of days here, Trump is going to be making some decisions about things that he needs to do. We've seen some of the most historic things that he's put out on social media in the last 3 or 4 days, which are stunning to me, but they're moving in the right direction. And this is not a one-way fight. This is a two-sided fight. So we've got to get out there in our local communities and fight back. This is up to the shopkeepers, the truck drivers, parents, students. Time to step up, stand up, speak up, get involved in local rallies, become activists on your own in communities.
All right, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. I want to thank our guest, General Michael Flynn, and thank you for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Thanks for listening to The Roger Stone Show. You can hear The Roger Stone Show Sunday afternoons at 3. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?
The Black Friday BOGO sale is here at All Family Pharmacy, and let me tell you, this is the kind of deal that actually matters. From November 24th through December 2nd, when you buy one ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, or mebendazole, you get another one absolutely free. So at a time when Americans are tired of being lectured and restricted by bureaucrats, this is your chance to be prepared on your terms. No politics, no gatekeepers, just real options that put you in control. Here's how simple it is. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/stone. Place your order online, and a licensed physician reviews it immediately. Once approved, your medication ships straight to your door, fast, private, and secure. This Black Friday event lasts only 1 week, and supplies are limited. So when the inventory is gone, that's it. No extensions, no second chances. Just like every other real deal worth talking about seriously. If you want to stay ready, stay protected, and stay independent, go to allfamilypharmacy.com/stone before December 2nd and lock in your Black Friday BOGO deal. Take control of your health. Stay prepared and stay free.